This episode is sponsored by Vorbos. Check them out in the description below.
I wanted to touch on the product lines that you launched. So 35 products is a lot.
Yeah, 35 products in how long?
In 18 months?
18 months.
Yeah.
I mean,
that is a huge amount of upfront work. So can you just talk us through some of the products that you launched, like the sort of work you did to go into that, how you launched it, and paint a bit of a picture there.
So those are 35 that passed, right? So I have another 20 that failed.
Okay.
Yeah. So each product is expensive to do the R&D in the first place. So the way it works, so in Zinkable, my sunscreen, I created the world's first mineral sunscreen that had no white cast on skin of color. That was extremely difficult to do because imagine you're working with 18% zinc oxide. That's a metal oxide that almost looks like chalk. Okay. So you've got 20%, say, chalk in a solution, and you need to make it invisible somehow on skin of color. That was extremely difficult. And then to get that at PA4+, so maximum UVA protection as well, was very difficult. So that process took 1.5 years just for Inzinkable. And I started that product first because I knew that had the greatest need, but was also going to have the longest time for us to pass that one. The other products are much easier because generally, if you're doing a cosmetic formula, whether it's say it's a moisturizer, we created an acne range, for example. It was a system, it was your wash, your salicylic acid wash, your AM gel, PM gel, and your leave-on exfoliator. Each of those products will take you, for me, I'm in the lab, it'll take me 2 days to make it. That was quite easy. Then I send it off for stability testing, microbiology. That takes a good 3 months. And then usually we have about 2 to 3 month lead time on packaging and ingredients. Okay. So usually I try and overlap the two because say 1 month in, I find that we're actually passing. We may not have passed yet, but I will go and buy the ingredients because I know that there's going to be a 3 month lead time there and packaging too. So that the following month, once I have passed, I can go straight to manufacturing. So that's how I've managed to cut down the time. Okay. Plus, there's no middleman. So for me, I can literally, when I make a product, I don't just make it in my head. I will go to my followers and I say, hey, do you guys want an eye cream? Right, what are your key issues? And I'll poll it. Then I'll say, right, these are key ingredients that we need. How many mils do you want? What kind of packaging do you want? And I will show them different options. They will come back to me. So I'm using Wiconomics right from the beginning. So that by the time we come to selling, we've already got thousands of people signed up because they've already helped me create the product. It's not some new cold venture. They've been part of the entire process.
And they're invested in it personally.
They're invested in it, And so I do that for every single product. My hair range, my anti-aging range. So every single product we've done together as a collaboration.
So the first product, the first iteration, you come up with it with your sister? Do you approach sort of a team of scientists? Because I think, I'm sure there's a lot of people. I mean, I've even spoken to people in the past where they're thinking of making a little sort of hair solution or a little oil solution. And, they'll put it in their own little bottles and they'll give it to their friends or family, kind of like everyone, I think, has those kind of home remedies.
Definitely.
How do you take it from kind of bedroom to boardroom, in that way? Like so, the first thing.
I'll say there's a couple of things there, and anyone listening as well thinking about creating a beauty brand, potentially these are some useful kind of anecdotes and facts. So definitely, I think about 7-8 years ago, even 5 years ago, a lot of the beauty brand founders I interview in my podcast, a lot of them have started in that sort of garage. I created this mask, I created this cream, mainly because the barriers to entry to go to labs with very little funding were very high. The minimum order quantities to make something would be 10 to 20,000, and to get a sample you have to pay even 1,000 just to get one sample, and then it gets cheaper as you make more. All this stuff, which is why you had to rely on going in the garage and making it yourself. For us, of course, there was a mixture of that where we were building these kind of recipes in the kitchen, because that's Ayurveda. It's really, really about less is more. But at the same time, this is in 2019, 2018, there were a lot more labs coming into the mix that were open to these sort of new indie brands that would have high potential, and they would want to get them in early. So they would potentially decide to even give you formulas without any upfront costs, with the hope or letter of intent that if you like it, you then stick with us. And if you start dangling carrots, I think Sephora is interested in us and stuff, they even want to go further, and they'll give you a team. So you don't have to invest so much more. So we did actually start quite quickly with certain labs because the barriers to entry have now been lower. And that helps a lot because you have to think about, yes, you have amazing formulas you can make in the kitchen, but when it comes to actually creating products that will last on the shelf, you have to have all these elements that you won't have access to, and you're not a chemist by any means. So I think that's important to not take too long today to go to labs, because now you can.
In terms of finding labs, for anyone listening, is it a case of, just Google is your friend, or is there certain kind of specific things to look for or search for people that might want to do it themselves?
It's a good question. I will say Google is quite hard to find good labs because labs don't do the very best job at marketing themselves. So it's not like an agency where you can type in like Fable and Main PR agency and then probably pops up and then you found the one they use. If you type in Fable and Main hair oil lab, I don't think you'll find who we use. So I do think there's a mixture of going to potentially there's a lot of different kind of summits or trade shows. They have some like Cosmoprof and different lab ones. We might be going to one in a few weeks in Japan. Like there's some all over the world, and a lot of the labs showcase themselves, and they also show the brands that are in there. So you can pass by and say, oh, they're showing Sol de Janeiro. They must be creating one or two or maybe all of their products, right? Yeah. And that's very important to know because most brands don't have just one lab. So we have 3 labs, for example. So you might have certain SKUs. SKUs are basically like individual like products that can come in different forms. Those might be with certain labs and other SKUs with other labs. So I would say one advice is, going to trade shows and you can get a much deeper enriched amount. Then you give your business card and you get a few. The second one is, there are some on Google that you can just find that have good SEO, and they're usually the biggest and the best. But you have to spend a lot of time just weeding them out and finding them. But the third other best way is, don't feel hesitant to DM a founder. Often, this is why I created Founder Beauty, is because the founders don't have much following. The brand has. So sometimes you'll see this brand that's got 10 million followers, but the founder is like 600 followers and no one knows them. I can name you 10 big beauty brands and you wouldn't know the founder.
And for everyone listening, Founder Beauty, as I said, is your podcast. But what it is that you interview founders of beauty companies.
Yeah, only founders, founder to founder. And now we've got nearly 200 founders that I've interviewed. And I think that's really important because I think knowing that the barriers to entry to also talk to and listen to founders, I think can really help people feel they're less lonely in that starting process. Because I can tell you, founders will help another founder out because they've been there. They know the struggle and they've been helped. So, if you DM me, I'll share with you my labs. If you, DM a few others, you can make your own list just from that. And otherwise, there are other ways to, if they don't reply to a DM, go to some summits and listen to them, pay $100 to speak, to listen at a beauty summit, and after go grab them, right? But so there is a lot of ways that people can actually realize that, is in their reach.
So with the initial product, how did it go from having a sort of, as you say, just a kind of boat in the fridge with bone broth to actually formulating a sort of scientifically tested, ready for market product?
Yeah, when we kind of found out it was collagen, we looked on the market and like what was out there already. And surprisingly, there wasn't really anything. Like there was a couple of skin supplements with other ingredients, but beauty supplements were quite new at that point. So it was about researching what the best type of collagen was, but the best form of collagen. And it's a really confusing market, especially for consumers. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and trying to like dig through the science, like speaking to experts. We knew we wanted something like incredibly convenient, didn't need to be kept in the fridge, the maximum of like what you could get in the minimum dose. That was really important. Okay. But yeah, that's kind of how we got to the 8,000 milligrams with vitamin C in a little yellow sachet, really.
And how did you go, once you decided that was what you needed, how did you then actually put that into production and get your sort of MVP product, if you like?
Yeah, we were going through some old emails the other day, actually. And me and my mum must have looked like crazy people. Like, you've got this like 55-year-old woman. She never worked.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so she met my dad when she was 25. And then he had 2 kids already, so my older sisters, and became a stay-at-home mum. So yeah, and me, he was at uni, just emailing like, so this collagen, can we import it? What's the regulations? Like, and then going to a blender and being like, can you mix this? Like, how do we make it like shelf stable? Blah, 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 blah. And then we found a manufacturer to put it into sachets, and they're ace. Like, we still speak to them like pretty much every day. They do all our packing. They were the ones, I guess, that took like the risk or chance on us.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we're doing relatively small volumes. Like, their other customers are huge.
Yeah, sure.
But now we're one of their biggest, and we're part of their sort of ecosystem, which is lovely.
Was there a degree, I suppose, when you were building that initial product of being nervous? Because I assume when you're doing consumables, there's a much greater risk about what you're actually putting into a product versus something you put on your skin or clothing or anything like that. Yeah. So was there any nervousness around that?
So that's the crazy thing. So obviously we have cosmetics now.
Yeah.
Cosmetics are so regulated, like ridiculously, which is amazing for the consumer. You have to do your testing. You have to upload like your toxicology reports, your report shelf life to the government website. Like it's on there. It's on the government gateway. Food, you can, as long as you have kind of the, your some food safety stuff, which not really people, they don't really check that. Like Trading Standards doesn't check it. You're kind of left to your own devices, which isn't good. It's not a good way of operating because we sit in between. We're not a medicine.
Yeah.
Not pure food. We're a supplement. We sit in the food category, which is just not regulated. And that's the problem with collagen. So you can get collagen from a lot of things. So like we use type 1, which is skin. We use fish skin to get that. It's just kind of how it works. You can, but like think of how many types of fish are out there.
Yeah.
And it's all based on the amino acid profile of that specific collagen from the fish that's gonna do the good stuff, if that makes sense. You then have like fish that are farmed or natural, and the fish we use, they like to live in crowded spaces. If you get them out in the wild, they generally live in really toxic environments. So you need to educate the consumer that you don't really want farmed wild fish. You want farmed, and it's really difficult you always want to do what's right as a company, and you always want to give the consumer the best thing, but sometimes it takes that education.
How big was the first batch? Do you remember? Like your first minimum order?
Yeah, so we were ordering, like we had to do like a ton at a time.
Right.
So a ton was roughly 8,000 units.
Wow.
And that was a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
But we did a smaller ton. We did a 500 kilogram batch, and I remember that lasted like a year.
Right.
And we were trying to reformulate because we'd formulated with a chemical sweetener. We wanted to be natural. That process took ages, and I remember I was like, "We're going to run out in 3 days. You need to blend it. We need to pack it because you have to wait for your micro results." So we ran out, and I remember sat there at the printer, like printing, because we had a male and a female product, but they were identical. Printing notes to put in the women's order, like that we're going to send the men's, but it's the same. Don't panic.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, and you do all these things, like you just like grasp and run with it, don't you? And you have to.
So when did you start your hair care brand then?
December 2019 as well.
December 2019.
TikTok.
Yeah, that was a busy month for you, right? Okay.
I hit 10K the day on TikTok in my first week, and then I launched when I hit 10K. It was really random.
Okay.
Right, okay.
What made you want to start that brand?
I remember working, and my boss was like, you can't just do this whole like posting cute photos on Instagram thing forever. Instagram's gonna die. Do you remember? Yeah. And people used to say that all the time, and I was like, it's not. It's changed our DNA and our brains. We can never go backwards from Instagram. And she scared me. So I was like, okay, cool, what can I offer? And I think one of the most beautiful things about Byarum is the fact that it naturally came about, because I always knew I wanted to create something that young girls who might not have had a mom who wouldn't naturally have access to this product, they now have it. They don't have to sit at home, mix all the oils. I don't want to leave it in their hands that they have to have the knowledge that my grandma had to mix all the oils and to put it into the microwave and burn their fingers and sloppily put it on. No, like I struggled with that. I was lucky to have my grandma. I want to make sure that we have a bottle that just in your own hands you can do it, and you don't even need to worry. You don't need to feel left out from this like ancient tradition of oiling your hair. So I always knew it was going to be an oil. I always knew it was going to be called Byarum. I always knew the formula. I always knew what the color of the bottle would be, what the logo would look like. And it just kind of, the ideation was there. The action was hard because I started in January 2019. So it took me basically a year to get the bottle into my hands. Okay. But it wasn't perfect. I had a private group on Facebook with my closest like followers. I think there was like 3,000 in there. And I soft launched in there, which a lot of people don't know. And they were very kind to me. They were the ones that told me there's a typo there. This link doesn't work. And I definitely would recommend that. And even if you don't have like a fan base, ask your friends and family, do a soft launch there, make a group chat or something where he can give you really honest feedback. I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs probably struggle with because there's a lot of like ego attachment. Like this is your logo. Like you guys, if you get feedback, I'm sure you guys are like evolved enough not to, but you're going to be like, no, that's my baby. This room right here, this podcast, this is my baby. And a lot of people have that ego in their products, but I think I've always been like a very detached person. So when people give me feedback, I was just like, done, fixed, next, tell me, what do we do? And then when it came to launching, I was good. There was no typos.
Yeah. Interesting. I feel like a lot of people don't listen to their customers enough when they launch a product. As you say, they follow their ego and they just jump straight in, assuming there's going to be a kind of a product.
But you create things in a bubble.
Yeah.
And I say this to my marketing team all the time. Like, we sit there and we think that this strategy works really well, and this post really conveys where we're going to be, but we don't even need to read it and we know what it's saying. Whereas a lot of people are going to look at that and be like, what are they saying here? Like, there's no context to it. So taking yourself out of that bubble and looking at it with raw eyes, or asking someone with raw eyes.
I wanted to ask, I mean, you've obviously got a degree of authenticity when you started, given your obviously medical degree or medical career prior. What would be your advice to someone who maybe wants to start a beauty line or skincare line or hair care line, whatever it might be, who doesn't necessarily have that background or has the access to laboratories and that sort of inside knowledge, shall we say, but perhaps wants to launch something where they see a gap in the market?
Yeah, I think anyone can do anything. So I'm all about growth mindset. Even if you've come from, you know, being a pilot and you've decided you don't want to create a sunscreen for pilots, you know, you can use your background to do anything you want in skincare. What I would do is, number one, look for a niche. Don't create another Me Too product. It's not going to do well, because now you're working on pennies and you're probably going to go bankrupt. You're going to lose everything. And it really is soul crushing when a business fails, because it's not just money, it's your time. It's your valuable time that you can never get back again. So really make sure you've got something that doesn't exist. If it exists, don't do it. And I say that myself. If something exists, I won't make it, and I'll say, hey guys, go and buy X, Y, and Z. It's excellent, and I buy it for myself or I buy it for my kids. So that's the first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is, you can hire a cosmetic formulator to make what you want, and just have a look at their past work, and make sure you like it, because there are a lot of not very good cosmetic formulators out there. Third thing I'd say is watch my videos, because I basically teach you. All the cosmetic formulators are watching my videos and learning and then improving their own formulas. So, you know, it's free information. I would definitely watch those videos on YouTube. And then after that, I would say build a following. That's absolutely key. It's nowadays, you know, it's hard to be anonymous and have a brand. So I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, look, Finita, I don't feel comfortable putting my face on camera, and I don't, you know, how can I do it without putting my face on camera? And I don't know really how you do that now, because it's extremely expensive. I remember when I first started, I felt the same way, and I looked at influencers and they were charging £5,000 for a story, and I just thought, I don't have £5,000 for a story. I'm going to have to figure this thing out myself. So unless you've got extremely deep pockets, even then I think people need that connection. They need to trust you. They need to believe you. Like, how many airbrushed, you know, pictures have you seen of ads, and you just think, oh, I just don't believe it.
I don't even register it.
Don't even register.
You see like a massive designer ad with something, it's just, it doesn't even register.
I totally agree with you. Like, even billboards now, they just don't work. Whereas before, that's all we had. And so I would say, if you're not feeling comfortable about going on camera, I would really think about if this business is going to work for you, because it's extremely hard. It might work, and you might have deep pockets, and you might be able to pay lots of influencers to talk about your products, but most of us don't.
People didn't know what collagen was, so it was quite easy to speak to someone and kind of say, do you know what collagen is? No. Okay, well, you're made of collagen and it depletes. Take this, you'll top it back up, and you'll get amazing results. So, like, do you want me to explain about collagen?
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Yeah.
So, like, actually, collagen's everywhere. Like, it's the biggest protein in your body. It's in your skin, nails, teeth, eyes, like joints, bones. Like, it's literally everywhere. And you get different types. So as you age, and a wrinkle's really easy to explain because you can see it. You can't really see your bones. As we age, you get worse at sort of depleting the stores. So, like, a wrinkle forming is collagen degrading.
Okay.
It's kind of easy to understand.
Yeah.
It's a massive protein, like I said, like your body can't get rid of it, so it chops it up into little pieces. With a supplement, you're ingesting those little pieces to trick your body into thinking more's breaking down, so it creates more.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah, so it's great for like people with like joint issues is the biggest thing it's been used for, really. Yeah, it's great for skin, hair, nails, and anything like that.
Were you really passionate about this before it launched? And first of all, were you drinking it before it became a product yourself? As in, were you one of the kind of lab rats that your mum gave the stuff to?
It was literally like stock. Like, I was eating stock cubes for years.
And so were you super passionate about skincare in any other personal way? Or was it more like, this could be a business and it is a good product, let's just run with that?
Yeah, so I love food. Hence I did food science at uni. Like, food supplements, that's what I love. Sport, like, is my thing, I guess. I love developing things, and weirdly what I wanted to do before I went to uni is like procurement and operations in a food company, which is what I kind of COO of Absolute Collagen for like the first 3 years. That's what I got to do. I love like problem solving, like that's one of my big passions. Skincare, like I've never been a big like makeup person, it's not really my thing. Skincare, I love the fact that you can use kind of like supplements and skincare and kind of build beauty through like strength of your own body, if that makes sense.
Completely.
Rather than like covering up or putting something on top, etc.
Completely agree, yeah.
So I've kind of fallen into this, but it's through a passion, like it's through like a backdoor passion, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But now I love it. Like skincare is so interesting. Now I know this is my place.
This is your calling. In terms of the finance side of things, so down to the sort of nitty gritty, how much did you start with, and how much was that allocated to which sector? And what was that? Was that sort of savings from your career in beauty? Was that sort of family loan, business loan?
So I didn't have a typical business plan, which is probably not the best, but at the same time, like
it's worked out.
I wouldn't go back and change it because this is sort of like startup, you know, like if I felt it, I felt it. And I didn't really know. So, you know, you don't know how fast you will grow. So even what you create in your first year, if I based it on my 10,000 units, then I would have only projected this amount of sales and business and funding. But then God, I kept it a bit like skeleton, because when we went viral on TikTok after 3 months, I had to change the whole model and raise, fundraise with my family a bit more. So what we did is, so Fable and Main is fully self-funded. That's number one. It's funded by, my father is funding it. And this has been a big blessing for us because we can have this ability to not go out and raise investment and instead just rely on that. And also like my dad has worked so hard from literally coming from Uganda, Idi Amin time, you know, exiled out, and then from £50 in his pocket, literally selling in Wembley Market to building his own company. He's worked so hard for it. I think he's still instilled that hard work and discipline. So it's not like we've got this open check from him. We still have to prove to him what we're spending, how we're getting it back. These are all loans at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, I prefer trusting in my dad to get loaned in a bank or an investor where I give a chunk of the company away. So I've managed to do this. And this
just before you go on there, because I think that's an important point. If someone, obviously a lot of people won't be in that kind of situation where they're fortunate enough to have that. If they don't have that, would you recommend for something like beauty, going the investor route? Would you recommend the bank route or sort of saving and doing it yourself?
So beauty is sort of weirder and weirder each year. It changes. More or less, like this is just like a very basic rule book that I've spoken to so many founders I know roughly. To start a beauty brand, like you need at least £300,000. It sounds like weird, but like generally speaking, there's a website cost, there's initial units, there's initial marketing, all that stuff, maybe one or two team. This is minimum. But then if you do well and you have a strong retail partner, even if it's just one, and depending on what your brand is, it could be like a Whole Foods brand, it could be like a Selfridges or a Sephora brand. You then need to potentially have more capital to scale. And then that means more sampling, more units and this and that. So sometimes you could even need one or 1.5 million to start a good beauty brand today that's hit to stand. So of course that means significant capital raising.
High barrier to entry.
So there is that. Yeah, exactly. Now there are different ways to do it. You could create a brand very small, just have and sell out every 3 months and keep on fundraising it. There's even other models. Like one of my friends has got a beauty brand that is a dropship model. So it's sort of like Kickstarter. Like you basically have everyone pays up front, and then you make exactly what's needed, and they wait 6 months because they're willing to wait, and then you deliver the product. And that's sort of like a more even sustainable way. So there is many different ways, don't get me wrong, but on an average term, this is sort of like the typical rule book I've been seeing as an average. Now, of course, if you're doing the first initial friends and family potentially, right, or 300K, I always say best to like not give too much of your company away at the beginning, because beauty brands can grow really quickly and then have crazy multiples and great evaluation. So usually on your net revenue, net sales, you can get a 5x evaluation. So if you're looking to sell, the last thing you want is you've built the brand in 3 years and you're giving 20% away for 25K or 50K, and you're going to be like, why did I do that? So I would say, generally speaking, friends and family is your first bet, people that believe in you, and they can invest in that. And, you know, it doesn't have to be done. You don't have to raise everything in one go and then say that's it for a bit. You can keep on you can have an open raise. And then I think once you start getting a good retailer, get initially good sales, and maybe you first start D2C and then you launch with a retailer. Maybe before you get into that retailer, you then have initial couple of months revenue. You can then potentially produce a good potential run rate with that. You can then also say, look, I've got this evaluation now, which is a 10x or 8x, because I believe now with the potential Sephora, the potential retailer, we're going to grow even more. And I've got my pipeline of products. You could probably then raise your proper full round, but not give so much away, because you can probably then even give it. Like I've invested in a lot of beauty brands that have only done 3 months of revenue, and they're evaluating them sometimes at 20 million, 25 million.
Oh, wow.
So it's possible, right? With just 2-3 months of revenue.
Out of the 300K that you think is sort of the minimum to start with, what's the split between product, branding, marketing budget? And in terms of marketing, what marketing avenues were you using?
So going back to also the finance question. So generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, you should have your marketing budget should be roughly 20% of your revenue forecast. So let's say you intend to do $1 million, you should be spending, like in beauty, this is the average standard, you should spend 200K in marketing.
Right.
Try not to do 20, 30% sometimes, but if you're in high growth, but don't do too much more. I've seen brands do like 70, 50% because they just want to get a lot of revenue and then exit in a year or two. But if you're starting, no. So that's like one easy way. So let's say I intend with the 300K to make $1 million. I think 200K is quite a lot at that point. So maybe 200K doesn't do that. At the beginning though, like when you're doing the initial first amount, I think a lot of that is quite these one fixed costs that usually you won't need to do that much again.
Right.
Meaning those fixed costs would be a website cost that, will be a big investment first, but it's done. It might be certain like recruitment costs, fees to hire some people. It might be your office space first. So certain things, the first samples and trademark costs, legal costs, all those stuff are important. Like you might need to get your brand registered by all these different countries. But then once it's done, you're solid for a while.
And so how did you make that for £5 an hour? How did you make that work? Because the travel time and then the money on travel and all that kind of stuff.
Back then it was different. Back then people used to earn 50, 60 pounds a day.
Yeah.
So if I did 6-7 massages a day, which is a long day. I used to leave home 7. I would not come back till 11.
Wow.
So yes, that obviously later you try to combine in the same area and things like this. But I used to do like 8-9 massages a day, and some people give me a little tip, or they feed me, or like somebody knows, or did you have lunch? And give me. So it's a really like, even the people see the passion and so how you good to them. They want to help. So they helped me with the language. I didn't even have massage bed. So we used to literally do it on the floor.
Oh, wow.
Okay, right. Okay, you literally let nothing get in your way.
Like,
okay, right.
I guess for £5 you get what you pay.
Yeah, of course.
For, in a way.
You know what the product is.
The help, the fact that it's so cheaply priced is good, because it's like they're like, you don't have a massage bed. You're like, it's £5.
Yeah.
Take the massage.
Take
it now. Yeah. And so how did you go from scaling up? How do you? Because that's the thing a lot of people have a sort of problem with, or they encounter as a struggle, is like changing pricing. It's like, I'm charging £20 an hour, but how do I go from 20 and start charging more? It's awkward. A client's going to leave me. How do I have that conversation? How did you transition from?
Yes,
from that?
That's definitely a big factor, and it's a fear at first as well. So at some point you get so fully booked, right, that you just can't take any more clients, and you're realizing, okay, and also it's tiring because it's a very physical.
Sure.
So there is only so many hours a day you can do. So you just tell them, and you just accept that you're more likely to lose 30%, which is fine, because if you increase your prices, let's say by 20% or 30%, you're getting the same thing. So I think that 30% loss every time I increase, but it was just like new people came in, and new, it just was building up. So I would not, I would advise not to be feared of charging appropriate prices for the work if you have no space. So there is a buyer for any for everything, right? So it is what it is, and at some point you realize you just can't do it. So it's there is sorry, but I just can't do it. I'm physically tired. My hands are now hurting me, and I just can't do it.
How did you actually come up with the pricing then? Once you went for
£5,
and you increased.
It was just the £5. It was like more free massage as a tip.
Yeah.
Oil, whatever. So it was, I think back then the minimum wage was like £6 or £5.40 an hour. So I guess that sort of like was, I don't even know. I think it just was like more like a tip.
Money. And how did you price it when you increased it? How did you come up with that number?
Just £5 more.
Okay.
So I was like 10 quid. Then I went 20 quid. Then I went like 35, and I stayed for 35 for a long time. And but also my aim always was to be in central London. So I was selecting. So I already knew, even though I lived by Heathrow Airport, I already was moving into Chelsea and Belgravia area. So then then all of a sudden, when you're moving to Chelsea and Belgravia area, you're hitting the scene, and that is a totally different people. So all of a sudden you have
all the Chelsea money.
The CEO of Joseph, all the Chelsea, the housewife, all these people, celebrities, right? Just coming to you. And one of the clients of Chelsea, they had a salon. It's called Neville. It's in Belgravia. It's a very famous hairdressing salon. She was my client, and she said, by the way, we're restructuring the possibility for you to have a room there.
Ah, okay.
So I'm like, wonderful. So she was my client, and she said, okay, I have a salon and I want you to be there, right? So I start renting. 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week. And then I just started renting full time for like 8 years that space.
This is the economics of the cosmetics world. The vast majority of products are being sold in your local drugstore, whether it's Walgreens, Boots, or wherever you are in the world. Those companies take 30 to 50% margin of your product. And you have to be able to manufacture and have enough fat in the system to be able to reorder the second and third batch. Otherwise, you'll go bankrupt. So knowing that, and say you're selling a product at £5, that means they've already taken £2 away. Your VAT is gone. That's also another £1. And now you're left with £2. Now, in that £2, you're going to have to buy packaging. So my packaging costs about £1 per jar. And then your the ingredient that you're filling it with. Now, because I'm using expensive ingredients, the ingredients itself are £5. You wouldn't be able to sell it, let alone manufacture it. So if whatever you're buying in Boots, just as a matter of maths, the ingredients have to come up to less than 50p.
So the model must be then just direct to consumer.
It is.
It has to be, because that's the only way you can actually.
It is, but the other thing to know is the product you're buying in your local drugstore are cheap product. Meaning, not just you're buying it and it's cheap.
That's just blown my mind.
The ingredients being put in there, no matter what the claims are.
Because by definition, it has to be that.
Exactly. And that's what people don't understand.
Wow.
And so that what I realized was, these are all really cheap products with lots of claims.
Yeah.
But actually, what I realized is they're not using ingredients in the therapeutic index. Their cosmetic regulation is very lax. You can, for example, put 0.0001% retinol and say, this is a retinol cream.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Okay.
I saw that. I saw the video you did on the retinol creams. I watched that same thing. Yeah.
Wow.
So I didn't think people didn't realize this because there's a curtain on the cosmetic world and no one's going to expose it.
Yeah, of course.
And so when I started exposing product after product after product, then people started to understand, and then they went, hold on, so actually, Dr. V, can you make us a product? These are the percentages we want. These are the ingredients that we want, and put them together. And so I started making tyrosinase inhibitor kits with 10 tyrosinase inhibitors. That doesn't make any logical sense. The reason is you can only remember 3. So if you're in Boots, you'd be like, oh, this is a retinol cream. I can remember 1 ingredient. You would never remember 10 ingredients. So why would you put 10 ingredients in when it's financially not viable and people aren't going to remember anyway? And so that's why that model didn't work for me. It's because I had to create a whole new world where people can learn, they can educate themselves, and they can buy D2C. So there's no middleman. I don't need to give an extra 30% margin to anybody. So imagine, for me, you're buying a retinaldehyde retinol serum, which doesn't even exist on the market. You can't actually buy it anywhere else because there's such expensive ingredients to combine together at a reasonable price that it just wouldn't be viable on any shelf. And that's the vast majority of skincare.
You win by default. That's mad.
Yeah.